Hey friends, welcome to another video on Power Platform. Today we'll talk about a few different concepts. We will talk Fusion and Fusion development. We will talk about something called connectors, but also we will look at how we can use connectors as part of our Power App. So first off, we are talking Power Platform, right? We are talking about a low-code development platform. So why is Chris talking about Fusion and Fusion Teams? What is that? Well, Fusion Teams is actually something wonderful, something great. Because why? Because IT pros comes together with something called citizen developers. Now, a citizen developer, that's what you are, because you are a person who is not formally trained in software development, but you can still add a lot of value by using the Power Platform to create low-code applications. You want to collaborate with professional developers. And the way to collaborate with these professional developers is by forming a so-called Fusion team. So how could that work? Well, here's the thing. If you look at this image, you see that you've got web APIs down here at the bottom right. That's usually being built by professional developers. And then if you actually wrap those neatly in a little box that we like to call connectors, then these could be used as drag and drop components within Power Platform. So that's really how it comes together. Professional developers provide you with the building blocks, the Lego blocks that you need as a citizen developer, and use those in your Canvas app or Power Automate or what have you. So that's it. Fusion development, that's the thing that you should consider if you are at a company. Not only use your low-code business experts or business domain experts, but also leverage the fact that you've got professional developers, have them build those connectors. Okay, so we have gone into makepowerapps.com and we see our working space here. And yeah, we're about to create our own connector. Now, I'm using my role here as a professional developer because my company and my team, my Fusion team, have said, hey Chris, can you build a connector for us so that we can use that as part of our Canvas app? And I'm saying sure. So I'm also asking for some business requirement, and they're saying, well, we're going to do a hackathon, so we want to showcase something fun with connectors. So can you please take an API? And yeah, it doesn't matter what API, it should be fun. Okay, I'm collecting those business requirements, and I'm of course going to what I find fun, which is the swappy.dev or the Star Wars API. So I'm gonna use this API and I'm going to wrap that as part of a connector, and at the end of this video you will also see me use that connector in a Canvas application. I am a professional developer, so I go into Dataverse, I select custom connectors. Now here I can see that I in the past have built a connector already, but I'm going to create a brand new one by clicking this new custom connector. So I'm going to do create from blank, but I just want to point out that there are different ways of creating a connector. You can create one from an Azure service, you can create it from an open API file. We will look at that in another video. But essentially what you do is you take this description file that is from an open API JSON file and you generate a connector from it. So that's a really fast way. Using this create from blank way, it takes a bit longer because you need to describe all the various operations that's available on this API. You could also use a Postman collection or even import one from GitHub. So that's pretty cool. So create from blank. I'm going to call this one Swappy. This is short for Star Wars API. And hit continue. And do I want to change the background color? I probably do. What if I do, can I do black? No, I have to do this with, okay, so no colors. That works, right? Great. I can also change the connector icon. If I had an icon available of Darth Vader, I'd 100% be using that. Description, Star Wars API, great. Got various options here. Is it HTTPS, HTTP? Let's have a look. HTTPS, right? Yes, connect. You can always verify how your API is hosted. And I want to do swappy.dev. So I'm omitting the HTTP part. I have a base URL, that's great. security, do we have anything there? So this is if my API needed some kind of authentication, some kind of parameter as part of the headers, I would add it here. For example, via an API key, then I could just set that, and I can even give it the value to ensure that it can connect to the API. There's also basic authentication and OAuth, so yeah, lots of different ways to authenticate. This is an open API, so I can just hit no authentication. That's great. Go here, and yeah, now I'm at a place where I have actions, I got references and policies. What matters for our part is something called actions. This is where I expose the various actions that are available on this API. And yeah, so this is a summary field. So first off, we're going to expose an operation that says people1. We're going to copy that for later usage. I'm going to say fetch people. And yeah, I should probably write a lot here, especially in a business context, but because this is for a hackathon, I'm gonna do it a bit smaller. The operation API, this is a name that you choose. This is what you will see as part of using your connector, for example, as part of Canvas app. So this will actually be translated into a method name. So name this wisely so you know what you're getting. I'm gonna say people, that should be enough. Request. This I'm gonna hit import from sample. This is where I give it the full URL, and this was people, right? So I'm just gonna prepend people, but I'm also going to give it, and yeah, here I need to be selecting a verb. In this case it's a get. I'm gonna read data, but if it was another operation such as creating a resource or updating a resource, I would need to choose the corresponding verb. So I hit get. Any kind of headers that I need to be passing at this point, for example, instructing it to give me JSON or XML, this is where I would do it. I don't need it in this case. I need to fix this a little bit there. So I'm going to import. Great. Now I have a request, and yeah, you see that I did the question mark at the end of this. I did question mark page equals 1. Now this is great because my wizard here is able to identify the fact that I have a page query parameter and specify it. Now if I want to be really good developer of a connector, I can just go in here and say gives me the page, a specific page. So I can really fill this out, and I can even give it a default value. But as part of doing this request, I can specify it with a 2 or 3 and different values. Is it required? It's a query parameters. Query parameters are normally not required, so it would be a no. But if it is required, you can just change in this checkbox. And you can see here how we can switch location here between path, query, header, body if we need to. It's of type integer, that's great. If that's not correct, if you instead in your query parameter want to send across a string, for example, or a number or a boolean, this is the place to change it. Validation successful, that is great. And we have actually hit a stage where it talks about code, and here we can actually give it some example code of how I would be invoking this. We won't be doing that at this time, but we will instead test it. So we will need to create this connector, so we hit create. And this is it trying to create this connector for the first time. So bear with it a few seconds while it's trying to create the connector. You can also see that it's trying to save the custom connector. So yay, we get a green checkbox. Will this actually work? Well, you see I have an operation available here, right? Called peep. And you also see how page has the default value 1. So first time we do this, we need a connection. And we just hit create at this point. So adding this connection, we have previous connections here in the past, and we're going to need to go back. We can easily go into our connector here and we go back to test. And now that we have a connector, you see that it has a connector selected in the drop down. That's great. We can test the operation. And what do we get back? Well, we get 82 counts, so 82 different items back. We get Luke Skywalker, we get C-3PO and R2-D2 and all the characters that you know if you know Star Wars, Darth Vader and so on. Quite a few folks. And we can also see that it's telling us that the next page is 2. So one thing we can do here is to try out the page parameter, the query parameter. What if we set page 2 and do another test? So here we see that we are actually getting page 2 because now we're getting Anakin as the first item in that response, and we see that the next page is 3 and so on. So that's really great. We've actually created a connector with one operation. But if I wanted to expose more things, because I can, I could be exposing planets as well. So we're actually going to create one more operation just so you see how things are done. So we can go back to definition, and this time we add a new action and we call this planets. You can just fill in this in whatever order. Fetches planets. I can say planets from Star Wars universe. That's great. And we do a request and give it a base URL, give it planets, and as the same thing we did last time, we add this query parameter, we select the verb and we import it, and we see that we get a query parameter, and we can just double check that everything is good here. Integer format, default value, let's do 1, right? We don't have to fill in these fields, but it's a good thing to do to keep on improving your connector. Validation succeeded, that's great. We have planets now, we have 2 different actions, and we can hit update connector. Once we do that, it's trying to say the connector. And yeah, as you build out the connector, it's a bit back and forth between the definition, where you could just add one action at a time, test it, or you can add all the actions and then test it. It's really up to you. So you go back to this testing area and you see that we now have planets. So we can select planets and we can see if that works. And we get what? Tatooine back. That's great. We know that planet. Alderaan, yes, we know it. Yavin 4, Hoth, yep, Dagobah, that Bespin, and so on. And we can just test our query parameter, and we can see that we are getting what back? Yeah, okay, so yes, we are getting page 2 back, because it says the next page is page 3 and the previous page being page 1, which means we are on page 2, so the query parameter is working. Now for our next move, we will actually build a power app that's able to consume this. So that's going to be exciting. We need just one more operation before we go, and so we're going to hit back into definition. We will add a new action called person. So get person, it's great, and we need a sample request. Do get, and then people want, that is great. So you could be adding default responses, or rather you should be adding default responses. I haven't talked about that this far, but I should definitely fix that. Let's update the connector meanwhile. So waiting for that update to finish. So one thing we want to do is to have a look at the response here. So for example, when we do people, let's do people 1, we do such a request, you see that we get a load of properties back. Now you can take the entire response if you want, or you can just take a few. I'm going to take a few, but if you want to extend that later, you can definitely do so. So I get back here to person, and I have my request, but I want to add a default response. Now I could be adding something like this. You see that it expects me to get some kind of JSON object back, but I can either give it values or the type string here. I should be doing that. And this is so that in my power app that's going to consume this connector, it knows what fields to expect, and we will be able to get some kind of tooling support with this. So name and height, that is good. It knows a bit more. Validation succeeded. Update connector. Now I should probably go into all the other operations and do a similar update for the response, just to make sure that that can be done. But as I aim to use the person operation at this point, I've done that one nicely. If you want to use planets and people, you should be updating the JSON response for those as well. Tell you what, let's actually go into people, see what we get back. We see that we get a results back. So we're going to copy this, go here and add a default response. We knew we were getting results back. To make this valid JSON, add the quotation. Now we just add one example of a response. So that's name, string, then height, also string. Now we've given that a default response. You know, an array is coming back. Let's update the connector for that one as well. For operations, you should be specifying request, you should be specifying the response, and all of this is so that your tooling is going to work as you consume the connector. Now that we have created our connector, we can go in and see if we can get some information from it. So here we have a Power App, and one thing we need to do is to make sure that we are setting this up nicely. So we can add data, and we can add data from various places. But in this case, we want to add data from the Swapi API. So this is a way for us to add the component. So now we've, whoops, we forgot to actually add the data there. Swapi, that's great, and connect. Okay, so we're waiting a little bit, but we can see that we now have it here. And we saw from before that we have a this connector already connected. So let's have a look at that, what that looks like. So one of the things that we need to do is to go into a button. So here we've added a button called Get Data, with the mission to go to a custom connector and fetch the data. So let's expand this a bit. What we do is to call the ClearCollect function, and it expects us to place the results of whatever we're calling into a collection. Now, we can either specify the collection name like so, or we can create the collection after the fact. Either way is fine. Just type a name of a collection, because that's where the results of calling the API will be placed. Now at this point I'm calling my earlier connector, but I can switch that out. So I instead call Swapi and I call it with people. I had a similar operation, so I can just replace this one. But quick look with Swapi and you see that we have the tooling support that shows us that we have people, we have person, and we have planets. We wanted people. Also note how we are specifying the parameter. This is the query parameter. If you remember from building the connector, we specify it to have page 1. This is the default value, but this is just to illustrate that we can change this parameter value later, which we will be doing. Remember also how we specified in people that we will have a results property, and this is again part of our connector definition. Now, because we specified that response, we know that in the response there comes a result property back. Once we ask it for the results property, we get this array. We place said array in the collection parameter. Now, the interesting part comes when we try to display this value, because once we know that this first call to get data has placed everything into collection, we can take results from that collection. So using the first n operation, we are able to say to the collection, hey, I want the first item in that collection, and then I'm going to use the last function and I'm going to get out the name. So this label will be able to showcase the name, and this other label is very, very similar. It's going to do almost the exact same thing, but it will collect the first item, but this time the height property. So instead of saying the name is, we should say something like height is, because that's what we're displaying. Great. So we are at the point where we have connected our Swapi API. We have called it. So when a person clicks the get data button, we will invoke the API on our connector. We will collect the results in collection, and we will display name over here, and we will place display height over here. Let's try that. So get data. This actually invoked our API. It got Luke Skywalker back. If you remember the movie, Princess Leia is telling Luke that he looks pretty short for a stormtrooper. This is why. If you want to change the value of the page, get another person back, we can do so here, page 2. And we can try this again. And this time around, we are getting someone completely else, which is Anakin Skywalker. And we also notice that our label isn't big enough. Let's make it bigger. There. Now we see that the name is Anakin Skywalker, and we see that his height is 188 centimeters, which tells us that all in all, specify a button to invoke the API, make sure that you use ClearCollect, put that into a collection, and once you have that in the collection, you can use a combination of first n with last to yank out either name property or height property. So this is the full circle of this video. You started off by having explained to you what Fusion is, then we went through what is a connector, how can you build one as a professional developer, and now finally as a low-code developer I was able to use the work of the professional developer and invoke that API, get that data out and display it in my Canvas application. So thank you so much for watching this video. If you like what you're seeing, I would greatly appreciate a like and or a subscribe. So hopefully I'll see you in the next video.